I stood before the snow-white floral arch, listening to the violin drift past like a fake prayer. My mother saw me first, but she did not call my name. She called security. My sister was behind the bridal door, shaking with a secret no one in that room knew. I had not come to apologize. I arrived with a thin envelope, a thick file, and the signature authority to bring this whole wedding down in exactly one sentence. My name is Mila Knight, but the woman standing at the iron gates of the harbor and Hemlock Estate did not know that name. To her, I was a ghost, a glitch in the perfect matrix of a high society wedding, a stain she thought she had scrubbed out of the family linen 11 years ago. I drove my rented sedan up the long, winding avenue lined with ancient oaks, their branches draped in Spanish moss that hung like tattered gray lace. The South Carolina heat was already rising, pressing against the windows, humid and heavy, carrying the scent of salt marsh and expensive perfume. I parked the car between a vintage Rolls-Royce and a shiny new Mercedes convertible. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back was not the girl who had fled Dayton, Ohio, in the middle of a rainstorm with red swollen eyes and a maxed-out credit card. That girl was dead. Mila Knight was alive, sharp, and tailored. I wore a sleeveless dress in a shade of midnight blue that bordered on black, cut with surgical precision to fit a body that now spent hours in a boxing gym rather than hunched over unpaid utility bills. In my hand, I carried a matte black leather folder. It was thin, but it held enough weight to crush the festivities waiting beyond the hedge. I stepped out onto the crushed white gravel. The sound of my heels was a rhythmic, deliberate crunch, a metronome counting down to a demolition. The entrance to the garden was framed by an archway of white roses and hydrangeas so thick they looked like clouds pinned to a trellis. A hand-painted wooden sign on an easel announced the day's joy in looping gold calligraphy, "Welcome to the wedding of Lila Calloway and Graham Pierce." I stopped. I stared at the name, Lila Calloway, my little sister. My name was nowhere. There was no and family, just the bride and the groom. It was a declaration of existence, and by omission, a declaration of my non-existence. I had expected it, but the physical reality of it still felt like a paper cut across the iris. I was not a guest. I was an intruder in a memory I was supposed to be part of. I walked toward the entrance. The air smelled of money. Not just cash, but the kind of money that is borrowed to look like it has been owned for generations. I could smell the fresh cut of the imported peonies, the wax of the beeswax candles lining the path, the distinct, crisp scent of vintage champagne being uncorked 50 yards away. I knew this smell. I knew it because for the last decade, I had been the one analyzing the balance sheets of people who spent like this. I knew exactly how much debt was hiding under that white silk runner. "Excuse me, miss," the voice was not a question. It was a barricade. I looked up. Standing directly in the center of the archway, blocking the view of the white tents and the manicured lawn, was Teresa Calloway, my mother. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a floor-length gown in a shade of champagne that cost more than my first car. Her hair was swept up in a chignon so tight it pulled the skin of her face into a permanent expression of haughty surprise. She had not aged so much as she had hardened. The lines around her mouth were deeper, etched by years of silent judgment and the strain of maintaining a facade that was constantly crumbling. She saw me. For a second, I saw the crack in her porcelain mask. Her eyes widened, the pupils contracting in the bright sunlight. Recognition hit her like a physical slap. But she didn't gasp. She didn't cry out. She didn't say my name. Her eyes darted left and right, scanning the immediate area to see if anyone important had noticed the specter standing on the gravel. Satisfied that the wealthy guests were too busy sipping mimosas near the fountain, she marched toward me, her heels clicking aggressively. She stopped 3 feet away, maintaining the social distance of a contagious disease. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "No. Hello. No. My God. You're alive. No, I missed you. Just an accusation." I looked her in the eye. I didn't blink. "I came to attend my sister's wedding. Mother." The word mother felt foreign on my tongue, like a stone I needed to spit out. Teresa's face went rigid. She smoothed the front of her silk dress. A nervous tick I remembered from when the debt collectors used to call the landline during dinner. "You have no sister here," she said. Her voice was low, a jagged whisper meant to cut without drawing blood. "Lila is happy. We are happy. We erased the mess you made. You are not going to ruin this." "I didn't know my existence was a mess," I said, my voice calm, contrasting her frantic energy. "I received an invitation." "You did not," she snapped. "I checked the list myself 3 times. You are not on it. You do not exist in this world anymore. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." "I have a right to be here," I said, shifting the black folder from one hand to the other. "You have no rights." She raised a manicured hand, signaling to a man in a black suit standing near the guest book podium. "Security over here." The man, a broad-shouldered event manager with an earpiece and a weary expression, started walking toward us. Teresa turned back to me, a triumphant sneer curling her lip. "I will have you dragged out. I will not let you embarrass us. Not today, not when Lila is finally marrying well." Marrying well, that was it. That was always it. The transaction, over Teresa's shoulder, through the gap in the floral arrangement. I saw movement. Near the entrance of the main white tent, a figure in a silk robe was being ushered by 3 bridesmaids. It was Lila. She looked older, obviously, but she still had that fragility, that look of a bird that had never been taught to fly, only to perch. She turned her head, perhaps sensing the disturbance. Her eyes locked onto mine across the expanse of green lawn. She froze. Her hand went to her mouth. I saw the shock ripple through her eyes, widening, half in terror, half in disbelief. For a heartbeat, she looked like she wanted to run toward me. "Lila," Teresa barked, not turning around. Sensing the connection, she waved her hand frantically at the bridesmaids. "Get her inside now." The bridesmaids, confused but obedient, swarmed around Lila, pulling her into the safety of the tent. The connection broke. The door to the bridal suite slammed shut. I turned my attention back to the woman who had birthed me. "She saw me. Teresa, you can't undo that." "I can undo anything," Teresa spat. "I undid you." The event manager arrived. He held an iPad against his chest, looking between the furious mother of the bride and the calm, dark-haired woman in the midnight dress. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Calloway?" "Yes," Teresa said, pointing a trembling finger at my face. "This person is trespassing. She is not on the guest list. She is a stalker. I want her removed immediately. Call the police if you have to." The manager turned to me, his face professional but stern. "Ma'am, this is a private event. If you're not on the guest list, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." I didn't move. I didn't apologize. I let the silence stretch for 3 seconds, long enough for the humid air to settle around us. I looked at the manager. I looked at his shoes, expensive, Italian leather, worn down at the heel. I looked at the anxiety in his eyes. He was worried about a scene. He was worried about his venue's reputation. "I believe there is a misunderstanding regarding the list," I said softly. "There is no misunderstanding," Teresa shrieked, losing her composure. "She is nobody." I reached into the small pocket of my black folder. I pulled out a card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with embossed black lettering. Simple, heavy, expensive. I handed it to the manager. He took it, annoyed at first, ready to dismiss it. He glanced down. B. Hartwell Senior Risk Analyst, Forensic Auditor, Northbridge Ledger Group. The change in his demeanor was instantaneous. It was chemical. The irritation vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The Northbridge Ledger Group was not just a company. In the world of high finance, corporate event planning, and large-scale liability, Northbridge was the Grim Reaper. We were the ones banks sent when they suspected fraud. We were the ones who audited the auditors. We were the ones who froze assets before the champagne was even poured. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. He looked at the card again, then back at my face. He saw the cold intelligence there. He realized I wasn't a crasher. I wasn't a crazy ex-girlfriend. I was a suit. I was the law of money. "Ms. Hartwell," he stammered, using the professional alias I had adopted for my consulting work, the name that signed off on the audits. "My associates usually handle the preliminary walkthroughs," I said, my voice dropping an octave, slipping into the persona that terrified CEOs in boardrooms from Chicago to New York. But given the complexity of the financial structures backing this event, I decided to handle the final verification personally. Teresa looked between us, confused. She didn't know the name Northbridge. She only knew petty cash and credit limits. She didn't understand the predator that had just swum into her pool. "What is this? What is she talking about, David? Throw her out." David, the manager, took a half step back from Teresa. He looked at me with a newfound deference. I wasn't informed of a site audit today. Ms. Hartwell, the payments were cleared through the groom's holding company, and that is exactly why I am here," I said, touching the edge of my black folder. "To discuss the groom's holding company and the liabilities attached to this venue." Teresa grabbed the manager's arm. "Stop listening to her. She is lying. She is my daughter. She is a nobody who ran away 11 years ago." The manager looked at Teresa, then at me. He saw a hysterical mother. He saw a calm, dangerous professional holding a folder that could potentially shut down his business if the funds for this wedding were illicit. In his mind, the daughter story sounded like the lie. Or worse, if it was true, it meant the financial entanglement was personal, which made it twice as volatile. "Mrs. Calloway," the manager said, his voice tight, "if there is a financial compliance issue, we need to address it. I can't just remove an auditor from the Northbridge Group." Teresa's mouth fell open. She turned to me, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. What did you do? What lies are you telling them?" I stepped closer to her. I could smell her perfume. Chanel No. 5, the same scent she wore the day she told me I had to give up my college fund to pay for Dad's gambling debt. It smelled like betrayal. "I'm not telling lies. Mother," I said, leaning in so only she could hear. "I deal in facts now. Hard, verifiable facts." "Who do you think you are?" she hissed, her voice shaking with rage and a sudden, creeping fear she couldn't name. "You think you can just walk back in here? Who are you to think they have to listen to you?" I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. "You'll know," I said. "You'll know exactly who I am before Lila says I do." I nodded to the manager. "I'll need a quiet place to review the final vendor contracts before the ceremony begins, and I assume you have a seat for me somewhere in the back where I can observe." The manager nodded vigorously. Yes, of course. Right this way." I walked past my mother. She stood frozen on the gravel, a queen whose castle walls had just turned to paper. She watched me pass through the archway of white roses, entering the world she thought she owned, with the black folder tucked securely under my arm. The music swelled, the guests laughed, the champagne flowed. But as I stepped onto the grass, the only thing I could feel was the weight of the secrets in my hands and the devastating silence of the storm I was about to unleash. To understand why a woman would show up to a wedding armed with forensic audits instead of a toaster, you have to understand the architecture of the house I grew up in. It was a 2-story colonial in a respectable suburb of Dayton, Ohio. From the street, it was the picture of the American dream. The lawn was edged with military precision. The shutters were painted a cheerful slate blue, but inside, the air was always set to a temperature I can only describe as 0 degrees Kelvin. Teresa Calloway did not rule our house with a belt or a raised voice. She ruled with silence. She weaponized shame until it felt heavy enough to break your collarbone. I was 20 years old. I was a junior in college, attending on a full academic scholarship because Teresa had made it clear that the family resources were limited. I was also working 30 hours a week as an administrative assistant at a logistics firm, filing waybills and brewing coffee for men who didn't know my name. Lila was 18. She was a freshman at a private arts college that cost $40,000 a year. She was the artist, the dreamer, the princess. I was the pragmatist. In Teresa's vocabulary, pragmatist was a polite synonym for beast of burden. My paychecks were never mine. Every second Friday, I would come home and place the envelope on the kitchen island. Teresa would pick it up without looking at me. She would count the cash. She would nod. That was the transaction. I remember one specific Tuesday in November. It was cold, the kind of Ohio gray that seeps into your bones. I came home to find the electricity off. The house was dark. Teresa was sitting in the living room by the light of a single scented candle, weeping softly into a handkerchief. "What happened?" I asked, dropping my bag. "Your father forgot the bill again," she sobbed. "And Lila needs her costume fees for the winter showcase. I don't know how we're going to eat." "Mila, I just don't know." I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I did what I was trained to do. I drove to the ATM. I withdrew the $800 I had saved secretly for a used car, so I wouldn't have to take 2 buses to work. I paid the utility company. I bought groceries. I put the rest in an envelope for Lila's costume. When the lights came back on, Teresa didn't say thank you. She looked at the receipt on the counter and said, "You didn't need to buy the expensive brand of pasta. Mila, we have to be frugal." I paid the electric bill. "Mom," I said, my voice flat. "And Dad's insurance premium is due next week." "You do it for the family," she said, turning her back to stir the sauce. "Don't act like a martyr. It's unbecoming." That was the dynamic. I was the structural support beam that was expected to hold up the roof but never creak. I paid off Teresa's credit cards when she overspent on networking lunches. I covered Edmund's car payments so the neighbors wouldn't see a repo truck in the driveway. I was investing in a future that did not include me. But the breaking point wasn't the slow bleed of cash. It was the night of the signature. It was 3 months after I turned 21. The house smelled of lemon polish and roasted chicken. It felt festive, which should have been my first warning. Dinner was actually hot. Edmund was smiling, a rare occurrence for a man who seemed to shrink a little more every day under his wife's gaze. Lila was home for the weekend, looking radiant in a sweater that cost more than my entire wardrobe. After dessert, Teresa cleared the table. She placed a single document in front of me. It was thick, bound in blue paper. "We need to handle some administrative details regarding your grandfather's estate," Teresa said casually, pouring me a cup of coffee. "The lawyers found some old property titles that are complicating the tax filings. We need to consolidate everything under the main trust so we can manage it better." I looked at the paper. It was dense legalese, paragraphs of heretofores and aforementions. "What am I signing?" I asked, reaching for the page. "It's just a confirmation," Teresa said, her hand hovering near my shoulder, warm and reassuring. It was the first time she had touched me affectionately in months. "It confirms that you trust me and your father to manage the assets for the good of the family. It's a standard procedure to streamline the taxes. If we don't do it by tomorrow, the IRS is going to audit the whole estate." I looked at Edmund. He was staring at his coffee cup, stirring it rhythmically. Clink, clink, clink. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Lila. She was standing by the sink, drying a plate. She was watching me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She knew something, but she didn't speak. "Just sign it, Mila," Teresa said, her voice tightening just a fraction. "Don't be difficult. We're doing this to protect everyone." I was tired. I had worked a 10-hour shift. I wanted to believe that for once. We were just a family handling business, not a hierarchy of users and used. I wanted to believe that my mother's hand on my shoulder meant love. I picked up the pen. I signed my name, Mila Calloway. As soon as the ink touched the paper, Teresa snatched the document away. She didn't wait for the ink to dry. She closed the folder with a sharp snap. "Good," she said. The warmth vanished from her hand. She walked to the hallway cabinet and locked the folder inside. Something in my stomach turned over. It was a cold, hard knot of intuition. "Let me see a copy." "Mom." "You don't need a copy," she said. walking back to the kitchen to scrub a pan. It's filed. I want to read what I signed, I said, standing up. Sit down, she commanded. I didn't sit. I walked to the cabinet. It was locked. I turned to my father. Dad, what was that? Edmund looked up, his eyes watery. I'm sorry. Pumpkin, she said it was the only way. The only way to what? I demanded. To ensure Lila's future, Teresa said. She turned around, leaning against the sink, crossing her arms. That wasn't a tax form. Mila, it was a waiver. You just voluntarily relinquished your claim to your grandfather's trust fund. You signed your portion over to Lila. The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. You stole my inheritance, I whispered. We reallocated resources, Teresa corrected, her voice cold and steady. Mila, look at you. You're a survivor. You're tough. You can work. You can handle the world. Lila is delicate. She needs a safety net. She needs the full trust to maintain the lifestyle she deserves. You don't need it. You'd probably just waste it on something practical and boring. I looked at Lila. You knew. Lila dropped the towel. She looked at her feet. Mom said you wouldn't mind. Mom said you like taking care of us. I like taking care of you, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. I have been keeping the lights on in this house for 2 years. I have been paying for your textbooks, and you steal from me. Don't use that word, Teresa snapped. It's family money. It belongs where it's needed most, and right now, it is needed to secure Lila's prospects. You should be happy for her. Stop being so selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I looked at the three of them. My father, the coward, my sister, the accomplice, my mother, the architect. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the coffee cup against the wall. Even though my hand was shaking so hard the liquid was sloshing over the rim. I realized something profound in that kitchen. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was an asset class, and an asset class doesn't get to have feelings. I walked out of the kitchen. Where are you going? Teresa called after me. We haven't finished the dishes. I walked up the stairs. I went to my room. I took the small blue suitcase from the top shelf of my closet. I packed 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, my work uniform, and my laptop. I took the photo of my grandfather off the dresser. It started to rain outside. A heavy Midwestern downpour that hammered against the roof. I walked back downstairs. Teresa was waiting at the bottom of the steps, looking annoyed. Stop being dramatic. Mila, unpack that bag. You have work tomorrow. No, I said. If you walk out that door, Teresa threatened, stepping closer. Don't you dare think you can come back when you fail. If you leave, you are on your own. No support, no family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had just tricked me into signing away 6 figures of security because she didn't believe I was worth investing in. You have it backwards, Mother, I said. My voice was strange to my own ears. It was the voice of the woman I was about to become. I haven't been staying here because I need you. I've been staying here because you need me. We don't need you, she scoffed. We survived before you, and we'll survive after you. Good, I said. If this family needs me to stand, then I will let you stand on your own. I opened the front door. The wind blew rain into the foyer, spotting the hardwood floor. Lila, Teresa yelled. Tell your sister she's making a mistake. Lila stood in the kitchen doorway, hugging herself. She looked at me with those big, tearful eyes. Mila, please, just stay. We can fix it. You already fixed it, I said to her. You got the money. Enjoy it. Lila, I hope it buys you a spine. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it firmly. Hearing the latch click, it sounded like the lock on a vault. I got into my rusted Honda Civic. I backed out of the driveway. I didn't look back at the slate blue house. I drove to the interstate. I drove until the gaslight came on, 300 miles away. In the weeks that followed, I did not just leave town. I erased myself. I changed my phone number. I moved to Chicago. I legally changed my middle name. I cut my hair. But more importantly, I changed my nature. I stopped being Mila the provider. I became Mila the auditor. I went back to school at night, fueled by rage and caffeine. I learned how money moves. I learned how people hide it. I learned that love is a variable, but leverage is a constant. I never sent a Christmas card. I never called on birthdays. I let them believe whatever narrative Teresa spun, that I was ungrateful, that I was lost, that I was a failure. But the hardest part wasn't the poverty of those first few years. It wasn't eating instant noodles in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew. The hardest part, the thing that burned in my chest every single night for 11 years, was the realization of what that signature meant. They hadn't just taken my money. They had looked at me, calculated my worth as a human being, and decided that my only purpose was to be fuel for their fire. They had decided I didn't deserve to exist for myself. And that was why I was currently sitting in a garden in South Carolina with a black folder. I wasn't there to get the money back. The money was gone. I was there because they had built a castle on a foundation of lies. And they had forgotten one crucial detail. I was the one who knew where the bodies were buried, because I was the one who had dug the graves. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipping through the mail slot of my Chicago apartment with a soft thud that betrayed its weight. It was an envelope of thick cream-colored linen, the kind that costs $5 just to lick and seal. I picked it up from the hardwood floor. My name was calligraphed on the front in a looping, pretentious script, Ms. Mila Knight. They had used my new last name. That was the first tell. It meant they had been watching, tracking, or at least Googling me. Despite 11 years of radio silence, I carried it to the kitchen island. The marble cool under my fingertips. I didn't open it immediately. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at it. It looked like a summons. In a way, it was. When I finally slid my letter opener under the wax seal, the scent of lavender and expensive potpourri wafted out. It was a sensory assault, designed to evoke nostalgia for a southern upbringing I had spent a decade scrubbing off my skin. Inside, the card was heavy enough to use as a weapon. Together with their families, Lila Marie Calloway and Graham Thomas Pierce, request the honor of your presence. I scanned the date. It was 3 weeks away. I scanned the location, Harbor and Hemlock Estate. I knew the place. It was where the old Charleston money went to congratulate itself on staying rich. Then, a small, loose card fluttered out from behind the RSVP card. It was handwritten in Teresa's sharp, angular scrawl. No greeting, no signature, just a warning disguised as a plea. If you decide to come, please do not cause a scene. We want Lila to be happy. Don't bring your past with you. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound in the empty apartment. Don't bring your past, as if the past was a carry-on bag I could leave in the trunk, rather than the scars on my credit history and the hole in my chest where a family used to be. I was about to toss the entire expensive package into the recycling bin when my phone buzzed. A notification from my work email, then another, then a voicemail. I walked over to my desk, where my dual monitors were glowing with the blue light of spreadsheets and risk assessment algorithms. The email that caught my eye wasn't from a client. It was from a law firm in Charleston, Vanderbilt, Lewis and Hahn. The subject line read, Urgent Calloway Family Trust. Beneficiary and trustee notification. I sat down. The chair leather creaked. I hadn't heard the words Calloway Family Trust since the night I signed that waiver in the kitchen. I assumed that money was long gone, drained by Teresa's lifestyle or Lila's tuition. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Knight, pursuant to the terms of the last will and testament of Eleanor Calloway and the specific clauses of the Calloway Family Generational Trust, we are writing to inform you of an upcoming activation event. As you are aware, the trust is set to vest and disperse 50% of its principal upon the legal marriage of the youngest female descendant, Lila Calloway. I read the paragraph twice. My grandmother, Eleanor. She had died 2 years before I left home. She was a tough, silent woman who watched everything and said little. I thought she had left everything to my father, who had immediately handed control to Teresa. I continued reading. However, per the sealed codicil opened this morning in anticipation of the nuptials. The late Mrs. Eleanor Calloway designated a specific successor trustee to oversee this disbursement and manage the remaining corpus of the funds. The trust stipulates that the successor trustee must be present to countersign the release of funds within 24 hours of the vows. That successor trustee is you. Mila Knight, formerly Calloway. My hands went cold. I scrolled down to the attachment, a scanned PDF of a document dated 14 years ago. There, in my grandmother's shaky but defiant handwriting, were the instructions. She had bypassed her son. She had bypassed Teresa. She had named me. Mila has the head for it. The note in the margin read, Teresa will spend it on curtains and appearances. Mila will keep the roof up. I leaned back, the breath leaving my lungs. They didn't invite me because they missed me. They didn't invite me because Lila wanted her big sister to hold her train. They invited me because I was the key. They needed my physical presence and my signature to unlock the vault. Without me, the trust remained frozen. Teresa must be losing her mind. She must have found out about the codicil only recently, perhaps when the lawyers began the pre-wedding paperwork. That explained the cold note. She needed me there to sign the check, but she was terrified I would open my mouth. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Jade Whitmore, a crisp voice answered on the first ring. It's Mila, I said. I need you to look at a trust document. I'm sending it over now. Jade was my personal attorney, a shark in a silk blouse who specialized in asset recovery and family disputes. She was the only person in Chicago who knew the full story of why I worked 80 hours a week and never went home for Thanksgiving. I heard the typing on her end as she opened the file. Silence stretched for a minute. Well, Jade said, her tone shifting from professional to intrigued. This is interesting. Your grandmother was a smart lady. She knew your mother would bleed the accounts dry. She put a lock on it that only you can open. They invited me to the wedding, I said. I just got the card. Of course they did, Jade said. They need the body. But listen to me. Mila, this is dangerous. Dangerous how? It's a legal contract. It's a trap, Jade said. Look at the wording in Clause 4. The trustee must be present and willing. If you don't show up, they can petition the court to remove you for abandonment. They can say you're estranged, unreachable, and that you've abdicated your duty. A friendly judge in South Carolina might just sign off on an emergency order to bypass you. So if I don't go, they steal it, I said. Exactly. But if you do go, Jade paused, they are going to try to coerce you. They'll put the papers in a stack of wedding documents. They'll try to get you drunk. Or they'll try to guilt you into signing a full release of control immediately after the cake is cut. They want the money, Mila. They don't want your oversight. I'm not the 20-year-old girl they used to bully, I said, my voice hardening. I audit Fortune 500 companies for fraud. I eat coercion for breakfast. I know you do, Jade said. But family is different. Family makes you stupid. If you go as a professional. You go as the trustee, not the sister. I will, I promised. And Mila, Jade added, check the financials. If they are this desperate to get the trust unlocked on the exact day of the wedding, it means they are already spending money they don't have. They're leveraged. I hung up and turned back to my screens. Jade was right. I needed to see the battlefield. I logged into a proprietary database we used at Northbridge Ledger Group. It wasn't exactly public access, but it wasn't exactly illegal either. It was the gray zone where truth lived. I typed in Edmund Calloway. Red flags popped up immediately. Second mortgage, maxed credit lines, a lien on the house in Dayton. I typed in Graham Pierce, the groom. The results were flashy but hollow. He owned a branding agency, an investment firm, and a real estate holding company. But the debt-to-income ratios were a disaster. He was moving money in circles to look solvent. He was a house of cards waiting for a strong wind, and that wind was supposed to be my grandmother's trust fund. Then I checked the wedding venue, Harbor and Hemlock Estate. I pulled up the vendor filings. A wedding there cost upwards of $150,000. The deposit alone was $30,000. I looked at the transaction record for the deposit. Paid 6 months ago. The payer name was listed as Mila Calloway. I froze. I zoomed in on the screen. The billing address was the old house in Dayton. The credit card number was associated with a bank I hadn't used in 12 years. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a slow, heavy rhythm of rage. Teresa hadn't just erased me. She was still wearing my skin. She had kept an old joint account open, or perhaps reopened one using my social security number, which she had memorized. She was running up debt in my name to pay for the party where she intended to snub me. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Wedding. I started downloading everything: the bank statements, the credit reports, the trust codicil, the invitation scan. I traced the deposit transfer. I found the emails between Graham Pierce and a loan shark disguised as a venture capital firm. It was a masterclass in financial dysfunction. They were throwing a party they couldn't afford, to marry off a daughter to a man who was broke, hoping to unlock an inheritance that was controlled by the daughter they had disowned. And the linchpin of the entire scheme was a signature they thought they could bully out of me. I looked at the note from Teresa again. Don't bring your past with you. You have no idea, I whispered to the empty room. I wasn't going to bring the past. I was bringing the future. I was bringing the audit. I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. I pulled out my travel bag. I didn't pack the soft, floral dresses I used to wear to please my mother. I packed the structured, dark clothes I wore to hostile takeovers. I packed the midnight blue dress that looked like armor. I went back to the desk and printed the documents. The stack was thick. I put them in a plain black folder. I called Jade back. I'm going, I said. Good, Jade replied. I'll have a courier deliver a formal notice to the venue that you are the primary financial contact for the trust. It will spook them, but it will get you access. Do it, I said. And Jade draft a restraining order for the assets. If I see $1 move towards Graham Pierce's shell companies, I want to be able to freeze the accounts from my phone. Already drafting it, she said. I looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, glittering in the night. The city was cold, logical, and indifferent. It was the place that had raised me when my family wouldn't. Teresa thought she was inviting a ghost to her party. She thought she was inviting the scared little girl who ran away in the rain. She was about to find out that ghosts don't have signatures, but auditors have subpoenas. I wasn't going to the wedding to ruin Lila's day. I was going to save her life, even if she hated me for it, even if it meant burning down the fantasy my mother had built. I grabbed the black folder and the invitation. I was going home, and this time, I wasn't the one who was going to pay. The transition from daughter to auditor happened in the span of one sleepless night. I did not spend the days leading up to the wedding looking at old photo albums or crying over lost childhoods. I spent them building a case. My apartment in Chicago became a war room. I cleared the dining table and laid out the anatomy of the Calloway family finances like a surgeon prepping for a transplant. My laptop hummed with the heat of processing data, running background checks, and compiling cross-referenced timelines. I created a master physical file. I labeled it simply Wedding. Inside, I organized the evidence into 3 distinct sections, separated by color-coded tabs. The first section was the history of neglect. This contained 11 years of bank statements I had subpoenaed using my own identity rights, showing the dormant joint accounts Teresa had kept open. It showed the sporadic, desperate withdrawals she had made in my name, $500 here, $2,000 there, always just enough to keep the lights on or buy a new dress, but enough to wreck my credit score if I hadn't been monitoring it like a hawk. The second section was the identity theft. This was the smoking gun. I had the transaction logs for the wedding deposit paid to Harbor and Hemlock Estate. It was $30,000. Charged to a credit card, opened in the name of Mila Calloway 6 months ago. The billing address was my parents' house. The signature on the application was a forgery of my own. Teresa hadn't just uninvited me. She had stolen my financial ghost to pay for the exclusion. The third section was the trust mandate. This was the copy of my grandmother's codicil, magnified and highlighted. It was the nuclear option. I called Jade Whitmore on a secure line 2 days before my flight. Talk me through the extraction, I said. I had my headset on, pacing the length of my living room. It is not an extraction, Mila. It is an intervention, Jade corrected, her voice tinny but clear. You have the power of the purse. Under the terms of the trust, as the successor trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to pause any disbursement if you suspect the funds will be used for illicit purposes, or if the beneficiary is under duress. I can prove the illicit purposes, I said, glancing at the credit card fraud evidence, but duress Lila is walking down the aisle willingly. Is she? Jade asked. If she doesn't know her husband is broke, and she doesn't know her mother stole from her sister to pay for the party, is that free will? Or is that fraud in the inducement? Fraud, I agreed. Exactly. So, here's the play. You don't stop the wedding. You don't have the legal standing to stop a marriage license. You stop the money. I sat down and pulled out 2 pristine white envelopes. I had bought them from a stationery store that supplied diplomatic offices. I'm preparing the delivery packages, I told Jade. In the first envelope, I placed a single page. It was a summary of Graham Pierce's actual net worth, or rather, his net debt, and a copy of the credit card fraud report linked to Teresa. I sealed it with a wax stamp. I wrote Lila on the front. This was the personal appeal. It was the truth, offered without judgment. In the second envelope, I placed a draft of a civil lawsuit for identity theft, a cease and desist order regarding the trust funds, and a formal notification of an audit. This one was thick. I wrote Teresa on the front. This was the blade. There is one more logistical hurdle, I said. The venue. If Teresa sees me, she will try to have me physically removed before I can get close enough to use either of these. Then you need to become undeniable, Jade said. I hung up and dialed the number for Harbor and Hemlock Estate. I didn't ask for the reservation line. I asked for the accounts receivable department. This is B. Hartwell from the Northbridge Ledger Group, I told the finance director when she picked up. My voice was stripped of all emotion. I am calling regarding a compliance check on the Callaway Pierce event scheduled for this weekend. We have flagged a potential irregularity with the $30,000 deposit. The silence on the other end was immediate. Nothing scares a business more than the suggestion that their money might be clawed back. Irregularity? The director asked, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, the cardholder is present in my office. I lied smoothly. We are investigating an unauthorized use of funds. However, to avoid a chargeback that would freeze your accounts and cancel the event, I will be conducting an on-site verification personally. You're coming here. I will be there on the morning of the ceremony. I require access to the venue and a quiet space to review the final invoices. If I am denied entry, or if security attempts to remove me, we will initiate an immediate fraud reversal on the entire amount. Do you understand? Yes, of course, the director stammered. I will inform the site manager. We don't want any trouble. Good. Ensure that my name is on the internal clearance list. B. Hartwell. I hung up. I had just bought myself a ticket to the show. Teresa could scream all she wanted, but the venue management would be more afraid of losing $30,000 than they were of an angry mother of the bride. The final piece of the puzzle was the contingency plan. I hired a private process server in Charleston, a man named Reynolds, who had been a deputy sheriff for 20 years. I sent him a retainer fee of $500. I don't need you to serve papers yet, I told him. I need you parked 1 mile from the Harbor and Hemlock Gate. If I text you the word execute, you drive in and serve Teresa Callaway with the lawsuit for identity theft right in the middle of the reception. If I don't text you, you go home and keep the money. Understood, Reynolds grunted. I'll be ready. With the logistics secured, I turned my attention to the groom, Graham Pierce. I had spent the last 6 hours scraping the internet for traces of him. On Instagram, he was a titan of industry. There were photos of him on a sailboat in the Mediterranean, photos of him wearing a Patek Philippe watch that retailed for $80,000, photos of him shaking hands with minor politicians. He looked like the kind of man Teresa would have sculpted out of clay if she had the power. But I wasn't looking at the photos. I was looking at the metadata and the corporate filings linked in his bio. He listed himself as the CEO of Pierce Global Holdings. It sounded impressive. But when I ran the name through the Northbridge proprietary database, the results made my stomach turn. Pierce Global Holdings was a limited liability company registered in Delaware 3 years ago. It had no employees. It had no physical office, just a mailbox in a strip mall. But what it did have was a series of secured loans from high-risk lenders, the kind of lenders who charge 40% interest and don't ask many questions. Then I saw it. The connection that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. One of Graham's listed partner companies, on an old archived version of his website, was a firm called Apex Strategy. I knew Apex Strategy 2 years ago. I had led a forensic audit on a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle that had collapsed overnight. The CEO had drained the pension fund to pay consulting fees to a shell company. That shell company was Apex Strategy. We never found the guys behind Apex. They vanished into the digital mist. But the pattern was specific. They targeted businesses or families with liquid assets, inflated their own value, extracted the cash, and disappeared. Graham Pierce wasn't just bad with money, he was a grifter. I looked at the picture of Lila on his feed. She was looking up at him with total adoration, wearing a diamond ring that I now suspected was either fake or bought on credit. He didn't love her. He was hunting her. He knew about the trust fund. He had probably done the math on the grandmother's estate better than Teresa had. He was marrying Lila to get access to the capital injection he needed to pay off the loans from Apex before they broke his legs. My little sister was walking into a buzzsaw. I closed the laptop. The room was dark. Save for the city lights of Chicago filtering through the blinds, I had a choice. I could go down there and blow the whole thing up. I could project the bank statements onto the wall during the reception. I could hand the evidence to the police and have Graham arrested at the altar, but that would destroy Lila. She would be the girl whose groom was arrested. She would be the victim. She would be humiliated in front of 200 of Charleston's elite, and she would hate me for it. She would think I did it out of jealousy. Just like Teresa would say. No, I couldn't treat her like a child. I had to treat her like an adult. I had to give her the information, and then I had to let her choose. If she read the file and still wanted to marry him, that was her tragedy to write. But she had to read it. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection was faint in the glass, a woman in a silk robe, holding a cup of cold coffee, preparing to go to war with her own blood. My phone pinged. It was a text from Jade. I just got confirmation from the venue legal team. They've flagged you as a priority financial officer. You're in. But Mila, I typed back, what if Teresa or Graham tries to physically stop you from seeing the bride before the ceremony? It's not just rude. It's an admission of guilt. It means they know you have the power. Watch their hands. Desperate people do desperate things. I looked at the black folder on the table. Let them try, I said to the empty room. I turned off the lights. I was ready. I wasn't going to a wedding. I was going to a hostile takeover. The rehearsal dinner was held in the solarium of the Harbor and Hemlock Estate, a glass-walled structure that offered a panoramic view of the sunset bleeding into the marshland. It was beautiful, expensive, and suffocating. The air was conditioned to a perfect 72 degrees, but the moment I stepped through the glass doors, the social temperature seemed to drop to freezing. I had changed out of my travel clothes into a sharp, slate-gray jumpsuit. It was professional enough for a boardroom, but elegant enough for a cocktail hour. I wasn't wearing jewelry. My only accessory was the small, cream-colored envelope tucked into my clutch. The room was filled with about 40 people. The inner circle, the bridesmaids were laughing in a cluster, holding flutes of Prosecco. The groomsmen were loosening their ties, and there, holding court near the center table, was Teresa. She saw me instantly. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered, looking like a crack in a windshield. But Teresa Calloway was a master of the pivot. She didn't let the silence stretch long enough for the guests to notice the tension. She turned the awkwardness into a performance. "Mila," she exclaimed, her voice pitched high, vibrating with a fake warmth that made my teeth ache. She walked toward me, arms open, blocking the view of the other guests. "Everyone, look. My eldest daughter made it after all." She hugged me. Her body was stiff, hard as a plank of wood. She smelled of expensive Chardonnay and fear. near my ear. She whispered, "Smile, or I will make a scene that you will regret forever." I pulled back, offering a thin, practiced smile. "Hello, Mother." Teresa turned to the room, addressing the confused faces of relatives who hadn't seen me in over a decade. "Mila has been away, finding herself in the city. She was always our little rebel, running off to do things her own way. We are just so relieved she decided to come back to make amends." It was a brilliant narrative. It painted me as the prodigal child, the unstable one who had run away from a loving home and had finally returned to beg for forgiveness. It absolved her of everything. "I didn't come to make amends," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to carry to the nearby tables. "I came to witness the union." Teresa's eyes narrowed, but she kept the smile plastered on. "Well, get a drink. Don't just stand there." She drifted away to manage the caterers, leaving me exposed. I walked toward the bar. I could feel the eyes on me. Whispers started behind hands. "Is that the sister I thought she was in rehab? I heard she joined a cult." The rumors Teresa must have planted over the years were likely colorful. "Mila." I turned. My father, Edmund Calloway, was standing there. He looked smaller than I remembered. His suit hung loosely on his shoulders, and his hairline had receded significantly. He held a Scotch glass with a grip that suggested it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Dad?" I said. He looked at me, his eyes watery and red-rimmed. He didn't hug me. He looked around to see where Teresa was before he spoke. "You look good, honey. Successful." "I am," I said. "No thanks to the family fund." Edmund winced. He took a long sip of his drink. "Please, Mila, not tonight. Your mother she's under a lot of pressure. The wedding cost a fortune. Just don't make waves. Let Lila have her day. I'm not the one making waves." "Dad," I said, looking him in the eye, "I'm just the one watching the tide come in. Did you know Teresa took out a credit card in my name to pay for the venue deposit?" Edmund choked on his scotch. He coughed, wiping his mouth with a cocktail napkin. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "She said it was a misunderstanding," he stammered. "She said she'd pay it back before you noticed. We were just tight on cash flow until after the wedding. Until the trust unlocks," I finished for him. "You're all betting on money you don't have yet. It's for the family," he pleaded, his voice a pathetic whisper. "We just need to get through tomorrow." I looked at him, a man who had let his wife consume his children's futures to feed her own ego. "I'm not part of your we anymore, Dad." I walked away from him. I couldn't stand the smell of his weakness. I scanned the room for Lila. She was standing near the window, looking out at the darkening marsh. She wore a white cocktail dress, and her blonde hair was pinned up with pearls. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been placed on a high shelf. I approached her. She sensed me and turned. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she looked 11 years old again, standing in the kitchen while I packed my bag. "Mila," she breathed. "You really came." "I told you I would," I said softly. "Mom said you wouldn't. She said you sent the invitation back." Lila bit her lip. "I missed you. Mila, I know I shouldn't say that, because Mom says you abandoned us. But I did. I didn't abandon you, Lila. I escaped." She looked confused, her brow furrowing, before she could ask what I meant. A hand landed on my shoulder. It was heavy and possessive. "So this is the famous sister," a deep voice boomed. I turned to face the groom, Graham Pierce. He was handsome in a generic, magazine ad sort of way. Perfect teeth, tanned skin, hair gelled into submission. He wore a navy suit that fit too tightly across the chest, a style choice meant to emphasize his gym hours. He extended a hand. I took it. His grip was aggressive, a power move designed to crush the fingers of the other person. I didn't wince. I matched his pressure. Thanks to 3 years of kickboxing. "Graham Pierce," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his shark-like eyes. "Lila has told me very little about you. Actually, we were starting to think you were a myth." "I'm very real," I said. "Mila Knight." He paused at the last name. Knight, I thought the family name was Calloway. It is, I said. I built my own name. I respect that. Graham nodded, rocking back on his heels. Self-made. That is my philosophy too. Started from nothing. Built an empire. What line of work are you in? Lila said something about finance. He was fishing. He wanted to know how much I knew, or how much I was worth. I'm in risk management, I said vaguely. Insurance, he scoffed slightly. Consulting, I corrected. I help companies identify liabilities, bad debts, fraud, hidden leaks. Graham's smile stiffened by a millimeter. Sounds intense. Well, we don't have to worry about that here. All love and light this weekend. Right? Right, I said. He turned to Lila, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. It looked affectionate, but I saw Lila's posture stiffen. He was marking his territory. Babe, the photographer wants a shot of us by the cake. Excuse us. Mila. He steered her away. I watched them go. I moved to the edge of the room, near a large potted fern, trying to stay out of Teresa's line of sight. I needed water. As I reached for a glass on a passing tray, I heard a voice on the other side of the greenery. It was Graham. He wasn't talking to Lila. He was talking to his best man, a guy named Rick, who looked like he worked on Wall Street but spent his weekends betting on horses. Don't worry about the vendor payment, Graham was saying, his voice low and hurried. The transfer happens Monday morning. Once the old lady's trust hits the joint account, we are liquid. I can cover the margin call by noon. You cutting it close? Man, Rick muttered. What if the bank holds the funds? They won't, Graham hissed. It's a direct disbursement. Lila signs. I transfer. We pay the shark. Done. Then I have 6 months to figure out the next move. Just keep smiling and keep the champagne flowing. I stood perfectly still. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. Graham was essentially short-selling my sister. He was using her inheritance to cover a margin call on Monday. If the trust didn't pay out, he was dead in the water. He wasn't marrying Lila. He was marrying a bailout. I waited until they moved away. Then I scanned the room for Lila again. She was sitting alone at a table for a moment, adjusting her shoe. Teresa was busy berating a waiter about the temperature of the soup. This was my window. I walked over to Lila and sat in the empty chair next to her. She looked up, startled. Mila, you're making Mom nervous, she whispered. I don't care about Mom, I said. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the envelope marked Lila. I slid it across the white tablecloth. It sat there between us, innocent and terrifying. What is this? Lila asked, reaching for it. I put my hand over hers, stopping her. Don't open it here, and don't give it to Graham. Put it in your purse, tonight, when you are alone in your room. Read it, every word. Mila, you're scaring me. Is this a wedding gift? It's a choice, I said. It's the truth about Graham, and the truth about Mom. It's the things they aren't telling you. Lila stared at the envelope. Her hand trembled. Is it bad? It is necessary, I said. Before she could take it, a shadow fell over the table. What are you doing? Teresa was there. She moved faster than a woman in heels should be able to. Her eyes were locked on the envelope. Just giving my sister a card, I said, leaning back but keeping my hand near the paper. Teresa reached out to snatch it. I'll take that. We are collecting all the cards at the gift table. I moved faster. I grabbed the envelope and pressed it into Lila's hand. No, this one is for Lila's eyes only. Teresa glared at me, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and panic. You are trying to poison her against us. I knew it. You couldn't just stay away. You had to come here and ruin her happiness because you're miserable. Happiness. I repeated the word. It tasted sour. Is that what you call this? Mother selling her off to a man who is drowning in debt so you can get your hands on Grandma's money. Lila gasped. What? Lower your voice, Teresa hissed, looking around frantically. Don't you dare speak to me like that. I have done everything for this family. I sacrificed everything. You sacrificed me, I said, my voice ice cold. And now you are sacrificing her. I am securing her future, Teresa snapped. Something you wouldn't understand because you ran away. If you ruin this for her, Mila, if you destroy her happiness. I stood up. I was taller than her now. I wasn't the cowering 20-year-old anymore. You called it happiness when you took my college fund, I said, my voice steady and sharp as a scalpel. You called it happiness when you tricked me into signing away my inheritance at the kitchen table so you could buy better curtains. You have a very twisted definition of the word. Mother. Lila looked up at me, her face pale. What did you say? She tricked you. Teresa froze. She realized too late that she had pushed too hard. Lila, don't listen to her. She's lying. She's always been a liar. Read the envelope, Lila, I said, never taking my eyes off Teresa. The proof is in there, the bank statements, the signatures, everything. Lila clutched the envelope to her chest. For the first time all night, she looked at our mother with suspicion instead of adoration. I think you should leave now. Mila, Teresa said, her voice shaking. Get out. I'm leaving the dinner, I said. But I'll be there tomorrow. Try to lock the doors. Mother, I have the key. I turned to walk away. As I passed the entrance to the solarium, Graham Pierce was standing there. He wasn't smiling anymore. He had been watching the interaction. He had seen the envelope. He had seen Teresa's panic. He looked at me with a dark, calculating expression. The charm was gone. In its place was the cold, hard stare of a man who realizes his con is about to collapse. I stopped in front of him. Nice speech earlier, I said, about building an empire from nothing. Graham stepped into my path, lowering his voice so only I could hear. I don't know who you think you are, Mila, but if you try to mess with my financing, you're going to regret it. It's not your financing, Graham, I said, stepping around him. It's my sister's money, and as of tomorrow morning, I am the one holding the checkbook. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving the solarium in a stunned, vibrating silence. I could feel Graham's eyes boring into my back. He knew now. I wasn't a guest. I was the auditor, and the audit had just begun. The sun rose over the harbor and Hemlock Estate like a bruised peach, heavy and humid. It was the morning of the wedding, a day that had been meticulously choreographed for 6 months. But as I sat in the very last row of the white folding chairs, I could feel the invisible wires of the production snapping one by one. I had arrived at 7 in the morning. I was the first car in the lot, other than the florists and the caterers. I wasn't wearing my auditor's suit today. I wore the midnight blue dress I had packed, a garment that was elegant enough to be respectful, but dark enough to serve as a warning. I sat in the back, near the hydrangeas, watching the staff scurry around like ants under a magnifying glass. I checked my watch. It was 8:30. The ceremony was scheduled for 11. I needed to see Lila. I stood up and walked toward the bridal cottage, a separate white building with shuttered windows situated near the rose garden. The path was lined with pink petals that had just been scattered. As I approached the porch, a wall of black fabric stepped in front of me. It was the private security guard Teresa had hired. He was new, not the venue staff. He was big, and he had been given specific instructions. Name, he grunted, crossing his arms. Mila Knight, I said. I am the bride's sister. He didn't check a list. He didn't need to. He had been memorizing my face. Mrs. Calloway gave strict orders. No access for you. You are to stay in the general guest area or leave the property. I have a legal document that requires the bride's attention, I said, my hand tightening on my clutch where my phone sat, recording the audio. I don't care if you have the Pope's blessing, the guard said. You aren't going in. Behind the closed door of the cottage, I could hear laughter. Nervous, high-pitched laughter. I could hear the clinking of mimosas. Lila was in there, getting her hair sprayed and her face painted, completely unaware that her sister was standing 10 feet away, blocked by a rented thug. The door to the cottage opened. It wasn't Lila. It was the wedding planner, a harried woman named Sarah with a headset clamped over her blonde hair. She looked stressed. She saw me and stopped. "Ms. Hartwell," she said, using my professional alias. She looked at the guard, then back at me. "Is there a problem?" "My mother is the problem." "Sarah," I said calmly. "I need 5 minutes with Lila, alone." "Mrs. Calloway was very clear," Sarah whispered, glancing back at the door as if Teresa might burst through it with a flamethrower. "She said you would try to upset the bride. She said you will. She said you're mentally unstable." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Did she tell me? Sarah, does a mentally unstable woman usually flag a $30,000 credit card fraud on your venue's deposit?" Sarah's face went white. She stepped off the porch, pulling me away from the guard's earshot. "About that, I got a call from our billing department an hour ago. They received a notification from the credit card issuer. They are freezing the transaction pending an identity verification." "I know," I said, "because I authorized the freeze." Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. "If that money is pulled, we are technically in breach of contract." "The catering, the flowers. We haven't paid the vendors the final balances yet because we were waiting for the groom's transfer on Monday. If the deposit disappears, then the wedding is being held on credit," I finished for her. "And not just any credit, stolen credit." "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "What do I do? Do I stop the setup?" "No," I said. "Let the play continue. But I need you to do one thing for me. Lila has an envelope I gave her last night. A white one. She hasn't opened it yet. Has she?" I don't know. I saw her put it in her bag." "Tell her to read it," I commanded. "Tell her Hartwell says to check the figures before she puts on the dress." Before Sarah could answer, the cottage door flew open again. This time, it was Teresa. She was already in her mother-of-the-bride gown, a silver sequined affair that looked like a suit of armor made of disco balls. Her face was fully made up, but her eyes were wild. She saw me standing with the planner. "Get away from her!" Teresa shrieked. It wasn't a dignified request. It was a guttural scream that made the florists 3 rows away drop a vase. Teresa marched down the steps, her heels sinking into the grass. She grabbed Sarah by the arm, physically yanking her away from me. "Don't listen to a word she says. She is a liar. She is here to ruin everything." "Mrs. Calloway, please," Sarah stammered. "We were just discussing the schedule." I know what she was discussing. Teresa turned on me, her chest heaving. "You want money, don't you? That's why you came back. You smelled the trust fund and you came crawling back to extort us." She was shouting loud enough for the early guests arriving in the parking lot to hear. She was trying to frame the narrative before I could open my mouth. Mila the failure, Mila the beggar. I didn't yell back. I didn't get angry. I stood perfectly still, smoothing the fabric of my dress. I let her scream. I let everyone see the contrast, the hysterical mother and the silent, composed daughter. "I don't need your money, Mother," I said, my voice projecting clearly in the sudden silence of the garden. "I have plenty of my own. I'm here to make sure you don't steal anyone else's." You, Teresa sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "Security. Get her out of my sight. Put her in the back row. If she tries to come near this house again, throw her in the marsh." The guard stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. He ushered me back toward the seating area. I went willingly. I didn't need to fight. I had planted the seed with the planner. As I walked back to the lonely white chairs, a hand grabbed my elbow. "Mila." It was my father. Edmund looked worse than he had the night before. His skin was gray, and he was sweating through his shirt. He pulled me behind a large oak tree, away from the staring eyes of the catering staff. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Just go sit down. Don't make her angrier. She's on the edge. Mila, she hasn't slept in 3 days. She hasn't slept because she's afraid of getting caught." "Dad," I said, pulling my arm away. "Why are you protecting her? She destroyed our credit. She destroyed my relationship with Lila, and now she's selling Lila to a fraudster." "It's not that simple," Edmund whispered, wringing his hands. "Graham is a good man. He's just ambitious. And your mother, she just wants the best. You're embarrassing her. Mila, you're making a scene." I looked at him. I looked at the man I used to think was the strongest person in the world. I realized now that his passivity was just as toxic as Teresa's aggression. "I'm embarrassing her," I asked. "Dad, you stood there and watched her erase me for 11 years. You let her tell people I was a drug addict, a dropout, a failure. You let her steal my identity to pay for this circus. You let her make me a ghost." Edmund looked down at his shoes. "I tried to tell her not to. Trying isn't enough," I said. "I'm not doing this to embarrass her. I'm doing this because you are too weak to protect your own children." I turned to leave him, but another figure stepped out from behind the tree. It was an older woman with white hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was leaning on a cane. It was Aunt Margaret, my grandmother's younger sister. The one person in the family Teresa had never been able to control because Margaret had her own money and a tongue like a whip. "Hello, Mila," Margaret said. Her voice was scratchy but strong. "Aunt Margaret," I said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wouldn't miss the day the house of cards falls down," she said, a small, grim smile playing on her lips. She reached into her handbag a vintage leather satchel and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Your father is a coward," Margaret said, ignoring Edmund, who flinched. "And your mother is a viper. But your grandmother, she loved you. Mila, she loved you best." She held out the envelope. "This came to the house a week after you ran away. Eleanor wrote it before she had her stroke. Teresa intercepted it. She hid it in a box in the attic. I found it when I was helping clear out the storage room for the wedding decorations." I took the envelope. It was addressed to Mila. The handwriting was shaky. I opened it right there, under the oak tree. "My dearest Mila, I know you carry the weight of this family. I see how they use you. I am sorry I was too old and too tired to stop them. But know this, the money I am leaving is not for them. It is for the one who has the strength to say no. I have changed the terms. When the time comes, you will hold the pen. Do not let them bully you. You are the only Calloway with a spine. Save yourself first, and then, if you can, save your sister. Love, Grandma." Tears pricked my eyes. Hot, angry tears. For 11 years, I thought my grandmother had died disappointed in me. I thought she had agreed with Teresa's narrative, but she had known. She had left me the weapon I needed, and Teresa had stolen the instructions. "She blocked this," I whispered. "She let me think I was alone." "She was afraid," Margaret said. "She knew if you read that, you would never send money home again. She needed her cash cow." I looked at the cottage where Lila was. My anger shifted. I had been angry at Lila for staying, for taking the easy route, but Lila hadn't just stayed. She had been held hostage in a reality distortion field. If Teresa could hide this letter from me, what lies had she told Lila about me? Lila wasn't the enemy. Lila was the victim who never got out. "Thank you, Margaret," I said, tucking the letter into my dress pocket next to my heart. "Give 'em hell, darling," Margaret said, patting my arm. I walked back out into the open. The guests were starting to fill the seats. The string quartet began to tune their instruments a discordant, scratching sound that matched the feeling in my stomach. Teresa was back on the porch of the cottage, watching me. She saw me talking to Margaret. She saw the look on my face. It wasn't the look of a daughter anymore. It was the look of a prosecutor. She marched across the lawn again, ignoring the guests who were trying to wave at her. She came right up to me, invading my personal space. "I saw that," she hissed. "I saw Margaret give you something. What was it? More lies." "It was the truth, Mother," I said. "Something you haven't touched in 20 years. "I am warning you, Mila," Teresa said, her voice dropping to a terrifying, guttural growl. "If you do anything when that music starts, if you stand up, if you speak, if you even cough too loudly, I will call the police. I will tell them you are trespassing. I will tell them you threatened me. I will have you arrested in front of everyone." "You're terrified," I observed. "You're shaking." "I am protecting my daughter." "No," I said. leaning in close. "You're protecting your access to the trust fund." "The police are on speed dial," she threatened, her eyes manic. "Don't test me," I smiled. It was the same smile I gave a CEO right before I laid out the evidence of embezzlement. "Call them," I said. "Call the police. Call the FBI. Call the National Guard. But before they get here, before they can drag me away, you should probably know who has the legal authority to sign the release forms for the trust fund today." Teresa blinked. "What?" "Grandma didn't leave the authority to Dad," I said. "And she certainly didn't leave it to you." I tapped the black folder I had left on my chair. "She left it to me. Mother, I am the successor trustee. Without my signature, that trust fund is a block of ice, and Graham Pierce doesn't get a dime." Teresa's face went slack. The blood drained out of her cheeks so fast she looked like a corpse. She stumbled back a step. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible. The lawyer said—" "The lawyers opened the sealed codicil yesterday," I said. "Check your email." The music started. The prelude. Jesu, joy of man's desiring. It was sweet and lilting, a stark contrast to the devastation on Teresa's face. "You have a choice," I said. "You can let me sit here. You can let me talk to Lila before she signs the marriage license, or you can call the police, have me arrested, and watch the money stay frozen forever. What's it going to be?" Teresa looked at the guests. She looked at the cottage. She looked at me. She was trapped. She didn't say a word. She spun around and walked back toward the front row, her steps unsteady. She sat down next to Edmund, looking straight ahead, her hands gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't going to stop me. She couldn't. I sat down in my back row seat. I watched the guests fan themselves with programs. I watched the groom, Graham, walk to the altar, looking smug and confident. He didn't know yet. Teresa hadn't told him. I waited. The clock was ticking. And inside the cottage, I prayed that Sarah had delivered the message. I prayed that Lila was reading the envelope, because in about 10 minutes, the music was going to change, and the real war was going to begin. The string quartet shifted from the polite, ambient Mozart they had been sawing away at for the last hour to the heavy, deliberate chords of the wedding march. It is a piece of music designed to command attention, to force a room into reverence. In the humid air of the harbor and Hemlock Estate, it sounded less like a celebration and more like a gavel banging down in a courtroom. The guests rose in a wave of pastel silk and linen. I stood with them, not out of respect for the ceremony, but because I needed a clear line of sight. I was in the back row, a dark smudge in a sea of cream and blush. The flower girl, a cousin's daughter I didn't recognize, scattered petals with mechanical indifference. Then came the bridesmaids in their sage green dresses, smiling the tight, frozen smiles of women whose feet hurt. And then, Lila. She appeared at the top of the aisle, framed by the white floral archway where I had confronted Teresa the day before. The sun caught the sequins on her bodice, turning her into a pillar of light. She was objectively stunning. The dress was a masterpiece of lace and tulle, costing more than my first 2 cars combined. But I wasn't looking at the dress. I was looking at her face. Lila had always been easy to read. She wore her emotions on her skin. When she was happy, she glowed. When she was sad, she folded inward. Today, she looked like she had been shattered and glued back together in the dark. Her eyes were red. Not the misty, sentimental red of a bride overcome with joy, but the raw, swollen red of someone who had spent the last 20 minutes sobbing into a towel. Her makeup artist had done a heroic job with concealer, but they couldn't hide the puffiness or the terrified darting of her pupils. She gripped her bouquet of white peonies so hard I could see the stems bending under the pressure of her fingers. She wasn't walking down the aisle. She was marching to an execution. Edmund was walking her. He looked pale, his smile fixed and trembling. He patted her hand, whispering something I couldn't hear, probably some useless platitude about smiling for the cameras. Lila didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, her gaze locked on the altar, or perhaps through it. As she passed my row, time seemed to stretch. The air grew heavy. charged with the static of unspoken secrets. I held my breath. She didn't look at me, not yet, but I saw it. The maid of honor, a girl named Jessica, who had been Lila's roommate in college, was walking a few steps behind her to manage the train, in her left hand, tucked discreetly against the folds of her own dress. She carried Lila's beaded emergency clutch. The clasp was undone, and sticking out of the top, jagged and unmistakable, was the corner of a white envelope. The wax seal I had pressed onto it the night before was broken. She had opened it. She had read the credit card fraud report. She had seen the debt analysis of Graham's company. She knew. My heart hammered against my ribs. She knew, and she was still walking. Was she going to go through with it? Had the conditioning of 20 years the voice of Teresa telling her to be a good girl, to maintain the image, to secure the bag overridden the hard facts I had given her? Lila reached the front. Edmund kissed her cheek, a gesture that looked more like a plea for forgiveness than a blessing. He handed her over to Graham. Graham Pierce looked perfect. He was the golden boy, the hero of the story. He took Lila's hand with a reverence that would have fooled anyone who hadn't seen his bank statements. He smiled down at her, a look of tender adoration, but I was watching his jaw. It was tight, the muscles feathered near his ear. He was grinding his teeth. He sensed the energy coming off Lila. He felt the coldness of her hand. He was calculating the odds, running the risk assessment in real time. He knew something had shifted in the ecosystem of the wedding, but he didn't know what. He was betting on the social pressure to keep the train on the tracks. The officiant, a silver-haired man with a sonorous voice, began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words washed over the crowd. I tuned them out. I was scanning the front row. Teresa was sitting on the edge of her seat, her back rigid. She wasn't looking at the couple. She was looking at the guests, scanning for cracks in the facade. She turned her head slightly and glared back at me. Her eyes were two burning coals of warning. "Sit down. Shut up. Don't you dare." I didn't blink. I stared right back at her. "I am not the one you need to worry about anymore." "Mother." The ceremony droned on. A reading from Corinthians, a poem about two trees growing together. It was all performance art. The humidity rose. A bead of sweat trickled down the back of my neck. Then, the officiant cleared his throat. He looked out over the congregation. "If anyone here present knows of any just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It was a vacuum. Usually, this is a formality, a pause for breath. But today, in this garden built on debt and lies, the question hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop, a rustle of fabric, a cough. Every head in the first 5 rows turned. They didn't look at the ground. They didn't look at the bride. They turned and looked directly at the back row, at me. Teresa had done her work well. She had planted the seeds during the cocktail hour, during the rehearsal dinner. Mila is unstable. Mila is jealous. Mila might try to make a scene. They were waiting for the show. They were waiting for the crazy sister to stand up and scream. The weight of 200 gazes pressed against me. I could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their hunger for drama. Graham looked up, his eyes locking onto mine over the heads of the guests. He challenged me. "Do it," his eyes said. "Make a fool of yourself. You can't stop this." Teresa turned around fully, her hand gripping the back of her chair, ready to spring up and signal security. I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap. I kept my face neutral, a mask of professional detachment. I was the auditor. I was the observer. I did not stand up. Instead, I looked at Lila. She had turned slightly. She wasn't looking at Graham. She wasn't looking at the officiant. She wasn't looking at her mother. She was looking past them all, searching the back of the crowd until she found me. Her eyes met mine. They were wide, terrified, and pleading. She was drowning, and she was looking for the life raft. I didn't mouth words. I didn't gesture wildly. I simply looked at her, and I shook my head very slightly, a fraction of an inch to the left, then to the right. "I am not going to do this for you." my eyes said. I am not going to stand up and be the villain so you can be the victim. I am not going to make the choice for you. I gave you the truth. Now you have to stand. Lila held my gaze for a long second. I saw the realization hit her. I saw the fear, and then, slowly, underneath the fear, a spark of something else. Anger. She turned back to the front. The officiant, sensing the awkward length of the pause, smiled nervously. Wonderful. Then, by the power vested in me. Wait, the word was soft. But in the silence of the garden, it sounded like a gunshot. It wasn't me, it was Lila. The officiant froze. I beg your pardon? Lila let go of Graham's hand. She dropped it as if it burned her skin. She took a step back, putting physical distance between her body and his. I need a moment, Lila said. Her voice was shaking, but it was audible. Graham's perfect smile faltered. He reached for her arm, a reflex to control the asset. Lila, honey, what's wrong? Is it the heat? You look a little faint. He tried to play it off as a swoon, the fragile bride. Lila pulled her arm away sharply. Don't touch me. Graham! A gasp rippled through the crowd. A low murmur started, like the buzzing of bees. Did you hear that? What did she say? Teresa shot out of her chair like she had been ejected. She rushed to the altar, ignoring the protocol. Lila. Darling, you're just dehydrated. It's the stress. Sit down for a second. She reached for Lila, trying to herd her back into the script, trying to force the play to continue. Lila turned on her mother. Stop, Mom. We are just going to take a 5-minute break, Teresa announced to the crowd, her voice shrill, waving her hands frantically at the string quartet to play something. Music, play the music. The musicians hesitated, bows hovering over strings, confused. No music, Lila commanded. She looked at Sarah, the wedding planner, who was standing frozen at the side of the altar holding a clipboard. Sarah, give me the microphone. Lila, no, Teresa hissed, grabbing for her daughter's wrist. You are having a panic attack. We are going to the cottage, now. I said, give me the microphone, Lila shouted. It was the first time in her life I had ever heard my sister raise her voice at our mother. It was a raw, unpolished sound. Sarah, terrified and operating on instinct, walked forward and handed the wireless microphone to the bride. Graham looked at the crowd, his face pale. He laughed nervously. She's a joker. Everyone knows that. Lila, babe, put the mic down. Lila ignored him. She ignored Teresa, who was now standing there with her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock, paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of her doll fighting back. Lila stood alone in the center of the altar. She looked small in her massive dress, but she stood straight. She breathed in, a shuddering breath that rattled in the microphone. She looked out at the crowd. She didn't apologize. She didn't faint. She looked directly at the back row again. I'm sorry to stop the ceremony, Lila said, her voice amplified, echoing off the white facade of the mansion. But before I say I do to this man, before I sign anything, I need to ask my sister a question. The entire garden turned to me. This time, it wasn't with judgment. It was with shock. Lila pointed at me. Her hand was trembling, but her finger was steady. Mila, she said, please come up here. Teresa lunged for the microphone. Cut the sound. Cut it. But Graham caught Teresa's arm. He held her back. He was looking at me, and his face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He knew the game was over. He knew that if Teresa dragged Lila away now, it would be a scene. But if I came up there, maybe he could talk his way out of it. Maybe he could spin it. I stood up. My chair scraped against the gravel. The sound was loud in the silence. I smoothed my midnight blue dress. I picked up my black folder from the seat. I walked down the center aisle. The guests parted for me. They stared at me with wide eyes, shrinking back as if I were carrying a loaded weapon. In a way, I walked past the rows of friends, the cousins who hadn't called in 10 years, the business partners of my father. I walked past the flowers and the ribbons. I walked up the steps to the altar. I stood next to my sister, up close. I could see the foundation cracking on her skin where the tears had cut through. I could smell the fear on her, sour and sharp, but I also saw her chin. It was lifted. "I'm here, Lila," I said. I didn't need a microphone. Lila looked at Graham, then at Teresa, then back at me. She held up the crumpled white envelope in her left hand. "Is it true?" she asked. "Everything in here, the bank accounts, the loans, the signatures. Is it true?" Teresa stepped forward, her voice a desperate plea. "Lila, she forged it. She's lying. She wants to ruin your life." Lila didn't look at our mother. She kept her eyes on me. "Mila, is it true?" I looked at my sister. I looked at the woman who had been protected from the cold for so long that she had almost forgotten how to shiver. "I am a forensic auditor, Lila," I said clearly, so Graham could hear me. "I don't deal in feelings. I deal in facts. Every number in that folder is verified. Every signature is authenticated. Yes, it is true." Lila nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She turned to Graham. He opened his mouth to speak, to charm, to lie. "Lila, baby, listen." "And one more question," Lila said into the microphone, cutting him off. She looked at me again. "Do you have the power to stop the money?" Teresa gasped. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the predator in the tuxedo. I looked at the architect in the sequined gown. "Yes," I said. "As the successor trustee of the Calloway Family Trust, I have the sole authority to approve or deny the disbursement, and as long as there is fraud involved, I will not sign." The silence broke. The crowd erupted into whispers. Lila lowered the microphone. She looked at Graham. The adoration was gone. The confusion was gone. "Then I think we have a problem," she said to him. She didn't drop the mic. She handed it back to the stunned officiant, and then the bride turned her back on the groom. The garden was dissolving into a quiet, confused riot. The string quartet had stopped playing, leaving a jagged silence that felt louder than the music. Lila did not look at the stunned guests. She did not look at the groom who was currently signaling his groomsmen with a frantic, chopping motion of his hand. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was cold and wet with perspiration. "Inside," she said. "Now." She pulled me toward the side entrance of the mansion. Dragging her massive tulle skirt through the gravel, I followed. We bypassed the main reception hall where the cake stood like a mocking white tower and ducked into a small, wood-paneled library that was being used as a staging area for the bridal party gifts. Lila slammed the door and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking shut cut off the murmur of 200 people. She turned to me. Her chest was heaving. The mascara was finally losing its battle against gravity, streaking down her cheeks in dark rivulets. "Tell me," she demanded. Her voice was thin, stripped of all the bridal polish. "And don't you dare lie to me, Mila. Not today. Everyone else has lied to me today. You tell me the truth about the night you left." I looked at her. She wasn't the enemy. She was just the survivor who had been left behind in the blast zone. "I didn't leave because I wanted to, Lila," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I left because Teresa made it impossible for me to stay." "She said you stole money," Lila said, the words tumbling out. "She said you got into drugs. She said you stole cash from Dad's wallet and ran off with some guy to Chicago. She told me you hated us for being happy." I reached into my black folder. I bypassed the financial audits for a moment. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of the document I had signed on the kitchen table 11 years ago. The waiver. "Look at this," I said, handing it to her. Lila took it. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. "What is it?" "It's the document I signed the night I left. Teresa told me it was a tax form for Grandpa's estate. She told me it was just to help the family. But read the fine print. Lila." Lila squinted at the dense legal text. She read the line where I voluntarily relinquished all claim to the Callaway assets in favor of the secondary beneficiary. I signed my birthright over to you, I said gently, because she told me it was the only way to save the family from the IRS. I did it to protect you, and the moment the ink was wet, she kicked me out. Lila looked up, horror dawning in her eyes. But Mom said you refused to help. She said we had to use my college fund because you wouldn't contribute. I paid the mortgage for 2 years. Lila, I paid for your ballet lessons. I paid the electric bill. I pointed to the bottom of the page. Now, look at the signature. Lila looked. It says Mila Callaway. Look closer. She stared at the loops of the letters. That's not how you make your Ms. You always do the sharp points. This is rounded. Exactly, I said. This is a copy of the refiled version Teresa submitted to the court 3 years ago to update the trust terms. She forged a new version because she lost the original. She's been managing the narrative with a pen and a lie for a decade. Lila dropped the paper. She looked like she was going to be sick. I didn't know, she whispered. Mila, I swear to God, I didn't know. I thought you just didn't care about me. I know you didn't know, I said. That's why I'm here. I pulled out the second document, the codicil from our grandmother, the one Aunt Margaret had given me just an hour ago. Grandma knew, I said. Read the note in the margin. Lila read the shaky handwriting of the woman we had both loved. If anyone tries to remove Mila from this family using money as a weapon, let the weapon break in their hands. Let Mila hold the power. Lila let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She pressed the paper to her chest. Grandma left you in charge to protect me. To protect us both, I said. Lila looked at the door. Gram, he kept asking about the trust. For months. He said he wanted to help me invest it. He said he had a sure thing in real estate. He doesn't have a sure thing, Lila, I said. He has a mountain of debt and a company that exists only on paper. He is borrowing money to pay the interest on other money he borrowed. He isn't marrying you. He is acquiring an asset. Lila closed her eyes. The tears stopped. When she opened them again, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity that reminded me of myself. I need to go back out there, she said. Are you sure? Yes, she said. I'm not going to hide in a library while they sell me. We unlocked the door. The scene outside had devolved into a high society panic. The guests were standing in clusters, whispering furiously. Waiters were uncertainly holding trays of champagne that no one was drinking. Teresa was in the center of a group of elderly relatives, her hands flying as she spun the web. She's having a breakdown, Teresa was saying, her voice pitched high and frantic. Mila has always been jealous of Lila. It's a mental issue. We've tried to get her help, but she refuses. Please, everyone, just be patient. Lila will be back in a moment and we can proceed. Graham was not with the guests. He was standing near the DJ booth, cornering Sarah, the wedding planner. He looked furious. He was gesturing at his watch. I nudged Lila. Watch. We stayed in the shadows of the portico for a moment. I don't care about the interruption, Graham was hissing at Sarah. When does the wire transfer happen if the ceremony is delayed? Does that delay the bank processing? I have vendors waiting on Monday morning. Mr. Pierce, I can't process anything until the marriage license is signed, Sarah said, looking terrified. And right now, we don't have a bride. I'll get the bride, Graham snapped. You just make sure the funds are queued. I'm not losing my liquidity because of some family drama. Lila stiffened beside me. She heard it. Liquidity, not wife, not marriage. Liquidity. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Jade. Confirmed. The credit card used for the catering final payment yesterday was opened in your name. Mila, I have the IP address of the application. It matches the Wi-Fi at your parents' house. It is a felony. Do you want me to call the local precinct? I looked at the text. Then I looked at Sarah, the planner, who looked like she was about to cry. Stay here, I told Lila. I walked out of the shadows. I walked straight up to Graham and Sarah. Graham saw me coming. His face twisted into a snarl. You, You bitch! You ruined this! I didn't ruin anything. Graham, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. I turned to Sarah. I held up my phone, showing her the email from my legal team. Sarah, this is a formal notification from the Northbridge Ledger Group. The funds used to secure the catering and the venue balance were obtained through identity theft. The credit card is fraudulent. If you proceed with this event, you are accepting stolen funds. Your venue will be liable as an accessory to fraud. Sarah's eyes went wide. She looked at the screen, then at Graham. The color drained from her face. Is this true? She asked Graham. Of course not, Graham shouted. But his voice cracked. She's lying. She's trying to sabotage me. The bank has already frozen the card. Sarah? I said. Check your merchant terminal. The payment didn't clear. It bounced 10 minutes ago. Sarah didn't check. She believed me. She took a step back from Graham. Mr. Pierce, if the payment didn't clear, we cannot serve the dinner. I have to order the staff to stop. You can't do that, Graham roared. My guests are watching. Your guests? Lila's voice rang out. Graham spun around. Lila was standing on the steps, the sunlight hitting the tear tracks on her face. She looked magnificent and terrifying. Lila, Graham said, his voice instantly dropping into that wheedling, manipulative tone. Baby, thank God, your sister is crazy. She's trying to tell these people we can't pay. Tell them to start the reception. Why are you so worried about the money, Graham? Lila asked, walking down the steps. Why aren't you worried about me? I am worried about you, Graham said, reaching for her. I want to take care of you, but I can't take care of you if your sister cuts off our resources. We need that trust fund to start our life. To start our life or to save your company? Lila asked. Graham stopped. He blinked. Who told you that? Did she show you those fake papers? They aren't fake, Graham, Lila said. And neither is the fact that you just yelled at the planner about liquidity while I was crying in the next room. Don't listen to her, Graham shouted. Losing his temper completely, he pointed a finger at me. She's a sad, lonely corporate drone who wants everyone to be as miserable as she is. She doesn't understand family. She doesn't understand love. She just understands numbers. And numbers don't lie. I said, men do. You shut up. Graham lunged toward me, his hand raised. Mr. Pierce, Sarah screamed, but Graham froze before he could touch me. Graham, a deep baritone voice called out from the crowd of guests. A man in a gray suit stepped forward. He was older, with silver hair and the distinct posture of old money. I recognized him immediately. It was Robert Sterling, the CEO of a massive logistics conglomerate based in Atlanta. He was a guest on the groom's side, likely one of the investors Graham was trying to woo. Mr. Sterling wasn't looking at Graham. He was looking at me. He was squinting, a look of dawning recognition on his face. Graham, Mr. Sterling said, his voice cutting through the tension. Why are you shouting at Ms. Hartwell? Graham froze. He looked at Sterling, confused. Who? Ms. Hartwell. Sterling repeated. He walked over to me, extending a hand with genuine respect. I didn't know you were associated with the Callaways. It's been a few years. You handled the forensic audit on that merger I tried to do with the Apex Group. I took his hand. Hello, Mr. Sterling? Yes. I advised you against that acquisition. Best advice I ever paid for, Sterling said, turning to the crowd, oblivious to the bomb he was dropping. She found $40 million in hidden liabilities that 3 other firms missed. Saved my company from a disaster. She's the sharpest auditor at Northbridge. He turned back to Graham, his expression cooling significantly. Graham, you didn't tell me your sister-in-law was the Hartwell. If I had known she was vetting your financials, I might have looked closer at your prospectus before I wrote that angel investment check. The silence that followed was total. Graham looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stared at me. He realized, finally and fatally, that I wasn't just a bitter sister. I was the executioner, Teresa, who had rushed over to intervene, stopped dead in her tracks. Her mouth hung open. She looked from the powerful CEO shaking my hand to me. For 11 years, she had told everyone I was a failure. She had convinced herself that without her guidance, I was nothing. And now, here was a titan of industry shaking my hand and thanking me for saving his fortune. The reality shattered her delusion in real time. I saw it happen. Her face went slack, white as a sheet. She looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time since I was 20, she didn't see a child to be controlled. She saw a stranger who held more power in her little finger than Teresa had ever achieved in a lifetime of social climbing. "You," Teresa whispered. "You aren't just an assistant." "No, Mother," I said, dropping Sterling's hand and turning to face her. "I'm the one who catches people like you." I turned back to Graham. He was sweating profusely now. Sterling was looking at him with suspicion, pulling his phone out, likely to call his own lawyers. "Lila," I said, turning to my sister. "The checkbook is closed. The fraud is exposed. The investors are walking away. Now, look at him. Look at the man who says he loves you." Lila looked at Graham. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching Mr. Sterling walk away. He was watching his last lifeline vanish. Lila took a deep breath. She reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace Graham had given her the night before, a necklace I knew he had leased. Not bought. She held it out. "I think you're going to need the deposit back on this," Lila said. Graham looked at the necklace. His face contorted in ugly, desperate rage. "You stupid little girl. You're walking away from everything. You're nothing without me." "Actually," I interjected, stepping between them, "she is the primary beneficiary of a multi-million-dollar trust fund. You, on the other hand, are about to be indicted for wire fraud." Graham lunged, but this time, the security guard, the one Teresa had hired to stop me, stepped in. He grabbed Graham by the shoulder. He had seen the way the wind was blowing. He knew who was actually in charge now. "Sir," the guard said, "I think it's time you took a walk." Teresa let out a sob and collapsed onto a garden bench, burying her face in her hands. The facade was gone. The wedding was over. The audit was complete, but I wasn't done yet. I turned to the planner. "Sarah," I said, "bring me the final invoice. I'll cover the legitimate costs for the vendors. We aren't going to stiff the florists just because the groom is a crook." I looked at Lila. She was crying again, but she was standing tall. She nodded at me. A silent thank you. We had survived the crash. Now, we just had to walk out of the wreckage. The transition from the sun-drenched chaos of the garden to the air-conditioned silence of the bridal holding room felt like stepping into an airlock. I had requested, or rather, commanded a private meeting. The guests were left outside to murmur over warm champagne and the wreckage of social expectations. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of hairspray and dying lilies. There were 6 of us in the room. Myself, Lila, still in her wedding dress, looking like a statue that had begun to crack. Teresa, pacing like a caged tiger. Edmund, slumped in a velvet armchair, staring at the floor. Graham, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, his jaw working furiously. And Sarah, the wedding planner, standing by the door clutching her clipboard to her chest, terrified, but present because I had insisted on a neutral witness. I walked to the center of the room. I placed the black folder on the glass coffee table. The sound of it hitting the surface was heavy, final. "Let's be clear about why we are in here," I began, my voice level. "We are here to determine the future of the Callaway assets, and by extension, the future of this marriage." Teresa stopped pacing. She turned on me, her face blotchy with rage. "You have no right to hold court here. Mila, you ruined the ceremony. You humiliated us. I want you out." "I am not leaving," I said, "because I am the only person in this room who actually owns the checkbook you are all waiting for." "That is a lie," Teresa spat. "Your grandmother left the trust to your father. He is the executor. He decides when the funds are released." She looked at Edmund. "Tell her, Ed. Tell her she's making it up." Edmund didn't look up. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of profound exhaustion. "Edmund," Teresa shrieked. "He can't tell you that." "Mother?" I said. "Because he knows it isn't true. Grandma bypassed him. She bypassed you. She knew you would spend the principal on appearances and Dad would let you." I reached into the folder and pulled out the notarized document, the Callaway Family Trust codicil. It had the raised seal of the state of Ohio and the signature of the probate judge. "This is a certified copy," I said, sliding it across the glass toward Graham. "Article 4, Section B. In the event of Eleanor Callaway's passing, the role of successor trustee shall fall to her eldest granddaughter, Mila Knight, with full discretionary power over all disbursements." Graham pushed off the wall. He picked up the document. He read it. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, looking for a loophole, a mistake, anything. "It's real," Graham said quietly. He dropped the paper back onto the table. "She controls the money," Teresa laughed. A brittle, high-pitched sound. "It's a forgery. She forged it just like she forged that credit card application." "The credit card application was traced to your IP address, Mrs. Callaway," I said, looking at Sarah. "We have the digital logs. Sarah here has already received the fraud alert from the merchant bank. The only person forging things in this family is you." Teresa's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a new narrative. Graham, realizing the brute force approach had failed, shifted tactics instantly. His posture softened. He uncrossed his arms and took a step toward me, his face arranging itself into a look of reasonable concern. "Okay," Graham said, holding up his hands. "Okay, Mila. You made your point. You're the trustee. You're protective. I get it. I respect that. You want to make sure Lila is safe." He turned to Lila, his voice dropping to a husky, intimate register. "Babe, tell your sister. Tell her we are a team. We are family. The trust is just a tool to help us get started. We aren't enemies here." Lila looked at him. She didn't move. "We are family," Graham repeated, looking back at me. "And families help each other. I admit, my liquidity is a little tight right now. The market has been rough, but with the trust injection, I can stabilize the portfolio, and we all win. It's an investment." "An investment," I repeated. "Okay, Graham, if we are partners, let's do due diligence." I opened the folder again. I pulled out a spreadsheet. It was the risk analysis of his portfolio. "Show me your books," I said. Graham froze. "Excuse me. If you want me to sign off on a release of $2 million into your control," I said, "then treat me like an investor. Open your books. Show me your accounts receivable. Show me your debt service ratio. Show me the tax returns for Pierce Global Holdings for the last 3 years." The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to get louder. "That's proprietary information," Graham stammered. "I can't just share corporate secrets." "You can if you want the money," I said. "But you won't, because there are no secrets. There is just debt." I picked up the spreadsheet and read from it. "Pierce Global Holdings has 4 outstanding loans with high-risk lenders totaling $1.5 million. The interest rate is 18%. You are in default on 2 of them. You have a balloon payment due on Tuesday. That is why you were screaming at Sarah about the wire transfer. You aren't investing the trust. Graham, you are using it to pay off loan sharks before they seize your car." Graham's face went from tan to a sickly gray. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The numbers were right there in black and white. Lila made a small sound, a whimper. She was looking at Graham, waiting for him to deny it, waiting for him to laugh and produce a bank statement that proved me wrong. But Graham just stared at me with dead eyes. "Is it true?" Lila asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Are you broke?" Graham didn't answer her. He kept his eyes on me. "You dug deep. Who do you work for, the feds?" "I work for the truth," I said. Lila turned away from him. She looked at Teresa. "Mom, did you know?" Teresa flinched. "I knew Graham had some cash flow challenges. All businessmen do. It's normal, I told you. Lila, you have to support your husband. You knew, Lila said, her voice rising. You knew he was marrying me for the money, and you let it happen. I was trying to save us. Teresa yelled, dropping the mask. Your father lost everything. Lila, everything. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. The cars are leased. We have nothing. I needed this wedding to happen so we could access the trust and pay off our own debts. We are drowning. Edmund let out a long, shuddering sigh. He covered his face with his hands. So I was the bailout, Lila said. She sounded numb. I wasn't the bride. I was the paycheck. Don't be dramatic, Teresa snapped, reverting to her old habit of dismissing Lila's feelings. We did what we had to do to survive. Mila abandoned us. She left us with nothing. We had to find a way. I didn't abandon you, I cut in. I was pushed out. Lila looked at me. The signature, the waiver. Mom said you laughed when you signed it. She said you called us parasites. I looked at Teresa. Is that what you told her after you forced me to sign a document you lied about? I didn't force you, Teresa cried. You signed it willingly. Because you told me it was a tax form, I countered. And when I found out it was a disinheritance waiver, you threw me out in the rain. You were always difficult, Teresa sneered. You never fit in. You were cold. Lila was the sweet one. Lila deserved the money. And the letter? I asked. The letter from Grandma. The one Aunt Margaret gave me this morning. The one where Grandma warned me about exactly this moment. Teresa went pale. Margaret gave you that. She did. You hid it in the attic for 11 years. You intercepted my mail. You blocked my calls. You created a wall of silence so you could control the narrative. I turned to my father. He was weeping silently now, his shoulders shaking. Dad, I said, look at me. Edmund looked up. His face was a ruin of regret. Did you know she hid Grandma's letters? I asked. Edmund nodded slowly. I saw her put them in the box. Why didn't you stop her? Lila screamed. It was a raw, agonized sound that made Sarah jump by the door. Why didn't you tell me Mila tried to reach out? I was afraid, Edmund whispered. I was afraid of her. I just wanted peace in the house. I'm sorry. Pumpkin, I'm so sorry. Peace, I said, shaking my head. You bought peace with my life, and now you tried to buy it with Lila's. The room felt heavy, suffocating. The truth was out, bleeding on the carpet. Lila turned back to Graham. He had been watching the family meltdown with a calculating expression, trying to see if there was any angle left to play. Graham, Lila said. She stood straighter. The tears had stopped. She looked like a queen in exile. Yeah, Graham said. His tone bored now. The charm was gone. I need to know, Lila said. If there was no trust fund, if Mila signed a paper right now burning all the money, would you still want to marry me? Would you still want to take me home today? Graham looked at her. He looked at the dress. He looked at the face he had kissed 1,000 times. Then he looked at the black folder on the table. He let out a short, cruel laugh. Lila, he said, shaking his head. Look at yourself. You're a nice girl. You're pretty. But let's be real. You have no job. You have no degree. You have expensive taste and 0 skills. You are a liability, not an asset. He shrugged, adjusting his cufflinks. Without the fund, you're just another mouth to feed, and I can't afford any more overhead. The brutality of it was breathtaking. He stripped her of her humanity in 3 sentences. Lila didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She stared at him, absorbing the blow. It was the moment the girl died, and the woman was born. Slowly, deliberately. She reached for her left hand. She gripped the massive diamond engagement ring. It was tight on her finger. She twisted it. You're right, Lila said softly. I have been a liability. I let everyone carry me. My sister, my parents, you. She pulled the ring off. But I'm done being carried. She didn't hand the ring to him. She dropped it onto the glass table. It spun on its edge for a second, before clattering to a halt next to the legal documents. "Get out," Lila said. "Fine by me," Graham sneered. "Have fun paying for this party, sweetheart." He turned to the door. "Wait," Teresa yelled. She lunged forward, grabbing the ring from the table. She looked at it like it was a holy relic. "Lila." "What are you doing?" "Put this back on." "We can fix this, Graham." "Wait." Teresa ran to Graham, grabbing his arm. "Graham, please. She's just emotional. We can work something out. Mila will sign. I'll make her sign." She turned to me, her eyes manic, desperate. "Mila, sign. The papers give him the money. You are destroying this family." "The family is already destroyed, Mother," I said coldly. "I'm just clearing away the rubble." "I will not let you do this," Teresa screamed. She looked around the room, wild-eyed. She grabbed the black folder from the table, clutching it to her chest, as if holding it gave her the power. "I am the mother I decide. This wedding is happening." "No, it isn't," Lila said. Her voice was strong. "I'm not marrying him, Mom, and I'm not listening to you anymore." "You are ungrateful," Teresa shrieked, advancing on Lila. "After everything I sacrificed, you will do as you are told." I stepped between them. I didn't touch Teresa, but I stood in her path, a solid wall of midnight blue silk. "You don't get to command her anymore," I said. "Move!" Teresa yelled, raising her hand to slap me. "Do it!" I dared her. "Hit me. Sarah is watching. The door is unlocked. Do it, and I will have you charged with assault on top of the fraud." Teresa's hand hovered in the air. She looked at me. She saw the same eyes she saw in the mirror, but harder, stronger. She saw the daughter she had tried to break, and she realized the breaking had only made me bulletproof. She lowered her hand. She started to sob ugly, gasping sobs of a narcissist who has lost her audience. "I just wanted to be happy," she wailed. "I just wanted us to be someone." "We were someone," I said. "We were Callaways. You just wanted us to be rich." I turned to Sarah. "Sarah, please escort Mr. Pierce off the property. If he resists, call the deputy I have stationed at the gate." "Yes, Ms. Hartwell," Sarah said, opening the door. Graham looked at me one last time. There was no anger left, just the dull resentment of a con artist who got outplayed. He walked out. I looked at Lila. She was standing over the table, looking at the ring where Teresa had dropped it again. "It's over," Lila whispered. "No," I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "It's just beginning." Teresa sat in the chair Graham had vacated, weeping into her hands. Edmund sat opposite her, staring at nothing. I picked up the black folder. I took the trust documents. I took the evidence. "Come on," I said to Lila. "Let's go tell the audience the show is canceled." Lila nodded. She wiped her face. She didn't look back at our parents. She took my hand. Her grip was strong. We walked toward the door, leaving the two people who had made us behind in the cold, silent room. We walked out of the library and back into the blinding South Carolina sun. The garden was a tableau of confusion. The guests had abandoned the orderly rows of white chairs and were clustered in tight, whispering knots, clutching their champagne flutes like life preservers. The string quartet had packed up their instruments and fled, likely sensing that no amount of Vivaldi could fix the atmosphere. Lila walked ahead of me. She had discarded her veil in the library. Her hair was coming loose from its pins, strands of blonde falling around her face. She didn't look like a porcelain doll anymore. She looked like a survivor walking out of a burning building. She climbed the steps to the altar one last time. She didn't look at the officiant, who was nervously checking his watch. She walked straight to the microphone stand. The feedback whine pierced the air, silencing the murmurs. "Testing," Lila said. Her voice was raw, devoid of the sweet melodic tone she used to use to please our mother. It was a flat, hard sound. "I need everyone's attention," Lila announced. "There will be no wedding today." A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the garden. A few people in the back stood up as if to leave, but most stayed, glued to the spectacle. "I am sorry for the inconvenience," Lila continued. her hand gripping the stand so tightly her knuckles were white. "But I have recently come into possession of information regarding the financial and moral integrity of this union. I have realized that I cannot proceed. I need to protect myself." "Lila, stop." Graham came running from the side entrance where he had been lingering, hoping for a reprieve. He scrambled up the steps, his face a mask of panic and fury. He reached for the microphone, trying to physically wrestle it from her hands. "She's hysterical," Graham shouted to the crowd, his voice cracking. "She's not well. The heat has gotten to her." Lila didn't let go. She shoved him back. "Don't touch me." Graham lunged again, his hand raised as if to strike her or grab the stand. "You little bitch. You are not ruining my deal." Before his hand could connect, a blur of motion intercepted him. It was the private security guard, the same man Teresa had hired to keep me out. He grabbed Graham by the lapels of his expensive rental tuxedo and slammed him backward against one of the floral pillars. A vase of hydrangeas crashed to the ground, shattering. "Sir, you need to step back," the guard growled. "Get your hands off me," Graham screamed, thrashing like a caught fish. "Do you know who I am? I am the groom. I am the CEO of Pierce Global." "You are a trespasser," the guard said calmly. He twisted Graham's arm behind his back and marched him down the steps. "Let's go. The police are on their way to discuss a credit card fraud issue." As Graham was dragged past the guests, kicking and swearing, the illusion of his success evaporated. The investors, the business partners, the high society friends, they all watched him with expressions of distaste. He wasn't a titan of industry. He was just a desperate man in a suit he couldn't afford. But the silence didn't last. "Mila, you did this." Teresa stood at the bottom of the steps. She wasn't looking at Graham. She was pointing a shaking finger at me, her face twisted into a snarl of pure hatred. "You poisoned her mind," Teresa screamed, turning to the guests, playing to the gallery one last time. "My daughter, Mila, she has always been jealous. She couldn't stand to see Lila happy. She came here with lies and fake papers to destroy this family because she is miserable and alone." The guests looked at me. I could feel the weight of their judgment shifting. Teresa was good. She knew how to play the victim. I didn't hide. I walked up the steps and stood next to Lila. I took the microphone from my sister's hand. "I am not jealous, Mother," I said. My voice was calm, amplified across the estate. It was the voice I used in federal courtrooms. "And I am not alone." I opened the black folder. I held up the documents for the crowd to see. "My name is Mila Knight. I am a senior forensic auditor for the Northbridge Ledger Group in Chicago. My job is to detect financial fraud, embezzlement, and corporate theft." I paused, letting the title sink in. I saw heads nodding. I saw Mr. Sterling in the front row cross his arms and glare at Teresa. "I did not come here to ruin a wedding," I continued. "I came here because I am the legal successor trustee of the Calloway Family Trust, and as the trustee, I have a fiduciary duty to prevent the disbursement of funds into a criminal enterprise." I pointed to the empty space where Graham had been standing. "The groom, Graham Pierce, is currently insolvent. His company is a shell entity used to launder loan applications. He intended to use my sister's inheritance to pay off predatory lenders." Then I pointed to Teresa. "And the mother of the bride, Teresa Calloway, funded this event using a credit card opened in my name, without my consent, using a forged signature. That is identity theft. That is a felony, and the bank has already frozen the assets." Teresa gasped. She looked around, expecting someone to jump to her defense, but the guests were backing away from her. The social distance was physical now. "She's lying," Teresa shrieked, but her voice lacked power. It was thin and reedy. "She's just trying to control us." "I don't want to control you," I said. "I want to stop you from using my sister as collateral." I looked at the crowd. "There is one more thing," I said. "Some of you might wonder how I knew about Graham Pierce's financial state so quickly. You might think I hacked his accounts." I looked at the guests from the business world. "I didn't have to hack anything. Graham's company, Pierce Global, attempted to secure a line of credit from a venture capital firm in Chicago 3 months ago. They hired Northbridge to vet the application. I was the lead auditor on the file. I rejected his application because his assets were non-existent. I knew he was a fraud before I even knew he was dating my sister. A murmur of shock rippled through the lawn. It was the final nail. It wasn't just a family feud. It was a professional diagnosis. I turned to Teresa. She was standing frozen, her mouth opening and closing. She realized that the failure daughter she had mocked for 11 years had been the one person in the room with the power to vet her entire world. "You," Teresa whispered. "You knew." "I knew," I said. "And I waited. I waited to see if you would tell Lila the truth. I waited to see if you would protect her. But you didn't. You blocked Grandma's letters. You stole my identity. You tried to sell her." Teresa's face crumpled. She looked at the guests, the elite of Charleston she had spent her life trying to impress. They were looking at her with pity and disgust. Her social credit score had just hit 0. She looked back at me, her eyes narrowing with a sudden, vicious desperation. "You think you've won?" she hissed, stepping closer to the stairs. "You think you're so smart? You'll be back. You always come back. You crave my approval. Mila, you're just a little girl who wants her mommy to say she's good. You'll be back here begging me to forgive you for this." I reached into the folder one last time. I pulled out a thick, white envelope. It wasn't an invitation. It was a legal summons. I walked down the stairs and held it out to her. "I don't want your forgiveness, Teresa," I said. "I want my $30,000. Teresa stared at the envelope. "This is a formal demand for restitution for the fraudulent charges made to my credit history," I said, "along with a cease and desist order regarding any future contact with me or my assets. If the money is not returned to the bank within 30 days, I will file criminal charges with the Charleston District Attorney." Teresa didn't take it. I tucked it into the sash of her silver sequined dress. "I'm not coming back," I said. "The girl who wanted your approval died in a studio apartment in Chicago 10 years ago. I'm the woman who survived you." I turned my back on her. I walked over to Lila. She was standing at the bottom of the altar, looking at the chaotic garden. She looked shell-shocked, but she was breathing. "It's over," I said to her. Lila looked at me. She reached out and took my hand. Her palm was warm. "He's gone," she whispered. "The money is safe. But what do I do now? I have nowhere to go. I can't go back to that house with her." "You have a choice," I said. "You can come to Chicago with me. I have a guest room. It's small, and the view isn't great, but it's quiet. You can figure out who you are when you aren't being someone's daughter or someone's wife." Lila squeezed my hand. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but these were different. They were tears of relief. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd really like that." We started to walk toward the exit. The guests parted for us like the Red Sea. They didn't speak. They just watched the two sisters, the black dress and the white dress, walking away from the ruins of the dynasty. As we reached the patio, the venue manager, a man looking extremely anxious, stepped into our path. He held a leather folder. "Excuse me," he said nervously. "Ms. Hartwell, Mrs. Calloway, there is the matter of the final bill. The reception food was prepared. The staff is here. The cancellation fee, it's substantial." Teresa was standing 20 feet behind us, staring at the ground. She heard the manager. Her head snapped up. Her reflex, honed over decades, kicked in. She looked straight at me. She didn't speak, but the look was loud. "You pay it. You have the money. You're the successful one. Fix it." It was the same look she gave me when the electricity was cut off. The same look she gave me when Dad missed a car payment. The expectation that I existed to clean up their mess. The manager looked at me too. He knew I was the one with the credit rating. "Ms. Hartwell," he asked, "will you be settling the balance?" I looked at the invoice in his hand. It was for thousands of dollars, money for lobster tails that would never be eaten, and champagne that would go flat. I looked at Teresa. I smiled. "No," I said, "I won't." I opened my small black clutch. I reached into the side pocket. I pulled out a single, crisp $1 bill. I placed it gently on top of the leather folder the manager was holding. "This is a tip," I said, "for the show." "But the bill," the manager stammered. "The contract is signed by Teresa Calloway," I said, pointing back at my mother. "She wanted the party. She can pay for the party." I turned to Lila. "Ready." "Ready," Lila said. She kicked off her high heels, leaving them on the expensive stone patio. She walked barefoot onto the gravel path. We walked through the iron gates of Harbor and Hemlock Estate. We walked past the security guard who nodded at me with respect. We walked to my rental car. I opened the door for my sister. She got in, the massive tulle skirt filling the passenger seat. I got into the driver's seat. I started the engine. I rolled down the windows. As we drove down the long, oak-lined avenue, I could hear the sound of the ocean in the distance. It was the sound of the tide going out, taking the debris with it. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see Teresa standing alone in the garden, holding a bill she couldn't pay and a lawsuit she couldn't win. I didn't need to see the wreckage. I looked at the road ahead. I looked at my sister, who was leaning her head back against the seat, closing her eyes, and inhaling the first breath of free air she had ever tasted. I hadn't come here to be recognized. I hadn't come here for an apology. I had come to close the account. And as the wind rushed through the car, carrying the scent of salt and freedom, I knew the balance was finally zero. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and liberation. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe during a quiet moment at work? Please drop a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed seeing Mila take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people. Your support means the world to us.